settled in here for another exciting edition of 3D Politics. I'm Tom McKay, your host here at 3D Politics. I've got two of the three Davids, David Van and David Oldham. David Van with SoonerPolitics.org and David Oldham with ConstitutionalGrounds.com. I'm Tom McKay. You can catch me at Tom E. McKay on Twitter, as well as finding me right here at 3D Politics. We're going to talk federal, national, state, and local news, as we always do. Romney, the Weasel of the Senate, we're going to be talking about him, and we're going to follow up on that Fort Worth story, the shooting of that poor gal through her bedroom window. All of the excitement of the GOP state drama between Turner and McClain. It's a soap opera of epic proportion. And then, of course, our local story about Veterans Park Rally, the melee down there on the field. So let's start with this Romney, the Weasel of the Senate. It turns out that, this is from Sooner Politics, it turns out that Mitt Romney has kept a secret Twitter account for several years. And the account became a tool of weasel warfare when Donald Trump got the nomination. You know, this sounds like Chris Gain tweeting against Tim McGraw in favor of Garth Brooks.
That's right.
Tell me what happened.
Well, you know, it's fine. And listen, there's nothing wrong with having a secret account or an expert account. None of us have them.
Not that there's anything wrong.
No. Yeah. But the funny thing was, 2016, Trump wins at 17. He's in. And all of a sudden, this Pierre guy, what's his last name? Pierre? I think you've got it on your deal.
It's Delicate.
How do you say that?
Where is it?
I don't know.
It's a Delicate Peter is what it's...
Okay.
So I don't think it's in here.
And Mitt is a Mormon reverend, by the way.
Oh, yes, it's a reverend. Okay.
Yeah. And so, anyway... You got this guy, Pierre, who's talking about how great Romney is, and how terrible and immoral Donald Trump is. And, I'm thinking, why not just be a man and own your own statements instead of, hiding them behind some caricature?
Well, how many personal opinions can one man hold?
Well, everybody needs a personal troll.
Yeah.
I got plenty.
Even if themselves.
I think it was Delightful Peter is what it was.
Yeah.
It was Pierre Delight.
Yeah, I have to say, speaking of trolls, did you see the prayer I put on Facebook yesterday? I said, Lord, give me the wisdom to know who wants to be my friend and who just wants to troll deeper into my Facebook account. There are those people. Oh, and by the way, as soon as that hit the news, he took his account private again.
Yes, he did.
Pierre's gone back into hiding, and I have to tell you,
you were not the only one that ran with that story.
Yeah, and my one of my writers, Ian Copeland, who's a millennial. He just, oh man, this is an excellent meme, and he put it out there. Of Romney wearing a beret.
Oh yeah,
right. Mustache. Yeah. So anyway, that's the story. Romney being a weasel, and so yes, he is a weasel.
It's that transparency that we get from those rhinos on the right.
Yeah.
Yes, and my friends in Utah, I am sure, are kicking themselves for having voted wrongly in the primary.
Well, it's not like a Mormon to make anything up.
Boom!
Well, it's not like anybody to make anything up.
His name is Tom. We're David.
Tom E. McKay at Twitter. Go for it. At Tom E. McKay. So now, do you want to follow up on that Fort Worth story?
Yeah. Yes, let's talk about that. Just after we got off the air, actually, while we were on the air, Aaron Dean, the officer who shot the innocent Tatiana Jefferson in Fort Worth, snuck into her backyard on a legitimate call, but snuck into her backyard, and then when she came to the window, they're saying that she came to the window with a gun, which would have been her right, because somebody was in her backyard that she wasn't aware of.
2:30 in the morning.
And 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, I would definitely be, wanting to come with a gun, especially when you've got an 8-year-old sitting next to you on the bed playing video games.
Yeah.
Well, she got shot through the window, and while we were on air, he was arrested for murder, which is a great thing and was absolutely what needed to happen. It was a little slow in coming, but they did get around to it, and they did arrest him. Now, I have a question, and that is, why have we not heard of any of the other officers, especially the other one that was on the call with him, being arrested as complicit in his crime? Because any other criminal who is working with a prior criminal, with another criminal, and there's a death that happens during the commission of the crime, they are arrested with them.
Well, I can answer that. Now, this is state charges, keep in mind.
Correct.
And every state's different. You and I are thinking Oklahoma law, where that is the case. If you're the getaway driver and somebody inside shoots somebody, the getaway driver gets charged with shooting them, right? And so I don't know that Texas has exactly that definition.
Well, I have been so busy, I haven't been able to look it up this week, and I've been wanting to. But if any of our listeners know or can find it out and let us know, we'd like to know. Yeah. But here's the thing. David and I were having dinner the other night with our district attorney.
Yeah, Steve Kunzweiler.
And so I broached this question,
we doubled up on it.
We did. But this was a big question on my mind. What about them going into the backyard? How is that not a crime in and of itself? Because they entered her property without a warrant and then shot her.
Okay. Now, again, that goes to probable cause, right? Because Steve would not answer that question when put to him, do they have a right to go in your backyard without permission? Because I told Steve that I had called the police one night when I heard noises in my backyard, and the yard light had burnt out so I couldn't see, and I kept hearing the noise. And so I'm talking on the phone, and I tell him, I'm loading my shotgun now. I hope you guys get here before I have to use it. Okay. And they said, no problem, we're pulling up. I need to know, do we have your permission to go in the backyard? The officers are waiting in front. And then, they said, yeah. And they said, okay, we would appreciate if you would unload that gun. We would feel a lot safer. And I said, okay, if I know you're here and my doors are locked, fine. I'll stay on the phone. And we made that agreement, and so. Even
though you had no obligation to unload your gun.
The point I'm saying is, they asked me specifically, do we have your permission? Because until then, I don't know that they had probable cause that it wasn't a dog in the backyard.
Well, they don't, and that's my point. Yeah. Is all they had was a door was open.
Yes.
Therefore, we want you to come and check things out because that's not normally the case, and we're just concerned, as a concerned neighbor would.
Right.
And maybe one that's not trained to go and look things up and look things himself and things like that or whatever.
Right.
The neighbor called the police trying to do a good deed. Well, what happened was they went right past the front door and around to the back, all without a warrant and without chasing anybody. It's not like they were chasing a fleeing suspect through a yard, at which point you run through a yard. Hey, I chased a fleeing suspect through a yard as a private citizen. I went through a couple yards because he did. And I chased him, and that's just what you have to do because that's where he's going. Well,
if you have probable cause that a crime's happened.
I witnessed it. I mean, it was a hit and run. And he fled, and I chased him over the fences. I jumped up the same fences he did. I had one homeowner open the gate for me, so I didn't have to jump that fence. But the point was that in this particular case, there was no warrant. There was no fence delineating the backyard, and you can't come in. But it's private property nonetheless, and we all know where those lines are. And so the question is, why aren't the cops being held to account for illegally entering her yard and then committing murder and doing it in tandem? There's not just one cop involved in this. There's a second cop. and then there's the entire department and all of their training, because obviously this is their training, because they both went at this without any qualms whatsoever. I mean,
well, the only thing I'm not hearing that was the part of the story that bothered me, they trespassed and approached the private house with their guns drawn, never once notifying anybody who they were.
Absolutely.
Or that they were there.
Absolutely.
Or even just have your sirens going as you approach.
Well, I think... I think, and this comes down to what are police departments trying to do? Are they trying to check on welfare? Are they trying to alleviate and prevent crime, or are they trying to catch bad guys? And so much so that they're skulking around in the dark of an innocent woman's home in the chance that they might get the big one.
When the lights are on in the house.
Exactly. And they bypass the door. I mean, again, watch the video. It's up on Constitutional Ground.
Kunzweiler said something I thought was real telling here. He said, ever since 9/11, local law enforcement has had this fix this with the SWAT maneuver, the anti-terrorism, and that's what they're training for. And that's why I said last week, I want to know who's training this law enforcement, because it's whatever you are trained in that you default back to when you instinctively just act.
And Constitutional Grounds wants to be training these police departments because on constitutional matters, because this is reprehensible. There is nothing good about what is going on.
So here's my question. I think you're right to set it up this way. The fatal flaw started when they walked to the backyard.
Yes.
I have no problem with them going knocking on the door, yelling at police, or having sirens out.
Absolutely.
But here's what it comes down to. If there's credibility to the narrative, and that's a big if, credibility to the narrative of the cop, that she came to the window with a gun. Now, what do you do as a police officer? You're like, besides crapping your pants because you just got yourself into a mess, because you just violated her constitutional rights.
The cops actually had no right to shoot because they had no right to be there in the first place. So they have no right to defend themselves.
But here's the thing. The cop then, let's expand this narrative. Let's say she's got the gun pointing at the window.
They still have no right to defend themselves. None.
Do you see what's happened here?
Yes.
He painted himself in a corner, and then he said, to save my life, I've got to take some other life.
Yes. And without and the concern is they do this all the time and without qualms. That was the Betty Shelby case.
Okay.
She caused that by her actions. Now, everybody's going to come down on me.
His name is David.
But the point is, without her doing what she did, that situation is handled completely different, and we've got a live Terrence Crutcher.
Right.
It was completely the tactics that were used, that were illegally used, that were the cause of the situation.
Yeah.
And so these cops, and there are two of them that got her to the window, because without them making noise in the backyard, she doesn't go to the window to get shot.
Okay, so here's the thing I take from my position is, when the cops confronted outside the window with a woman coming to the door, it's up to him to throw his hands up and say, it's police, big emergency.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Instead, what does he yell?
Drop it or whatever, drop
something
it,
she
put it
couldn't
down.
Understand, but he claims it was police, or no, he didn't even say police.
I don't. It's absolutely.
So, right.
Nothing. He can't do that because he's been caught.
Here's my point. Identify. He has no constitutional authority to be pointing that gun at her.
None.
She has constitutional authority to point her gun at him.
Yes.
Boom.
And both cops are guilty.
Yeah.
Both.
The neighbor that called, he called on a non-emergency line. They showed up like it was an emergency and like they were undercover agents. There was literally no reason to be undercover or acting like it's an emergency.
And this is why I go back to who's training these people. because a typical cop, I mean typical, like your Andy Griffith show, okay, Andy Taylor, doesn't start. Now, if you're Barney Fife, I can't help that. But if you're Andy Griffith,
Except
it's
there are
kind of
cops
like
out there who are Barney Fife.
you've got to start thinking in what's the most sensible thing. But if you're trained to stop the next 9/11 attack, you're going to default to that training. And that's exactly what the cop did when he was confronted with the gun pointing at him.
This was not.
He defaulted to his training of, I take charge of this.
He didn't default to training. He immediately disregarded the call. The call was a non-emergency call. He didn't go off of any training.
Again, they diverted.
There was
from
no
that.
pressure to go off of anything.
When a gun is being pointed at you,
no, I'm
you
saying
don't
he
think
didn't even
you act instinctively.
He disregarded the call before he ever acted on his instinct.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, the chain of bad decisions happened well before they ever showed up.
Yeah.
Because they showed up dark. They showed up without lights and sirens.
Right.
Undercover. They get out. They sneak up on the house. They're already mishandling the call.
Right.
Then they go by the front door. They yet again another mishandle. Then they go sneak around to the backyard. They make noise, which is making the occupants get up. Then they go to the backyard, and she's by now perhaps retrieved a gun and coming to the window to see what's going on, failing to realize that the light behind her is actually giving her away. But the point is that all of these decisions were made by the cops, not by the homeowner or the
and that's what I want to get at. Just by nature of the fact that the concerned neighbor didn't call emergency line, they called non-emergency. It was these cops in their own mind that contrived this big hostage situation.
Or whatever.
Yes, exactly. And they
the probability or the possibility.
Yes, and that's why I say, in fact, Don Spencer, who we're going to talk about later tonight, he at one point was talking on Facebook about, he says, if you feel your life is in danger, you are authorized to use lethal force. And I said, no, Don. If a reasonable suspicion exists, not whether you feel, because I've worked with enough mentally ill people, and some who aren't diagnosed, but I know are, and that there's a difference between how you feel and what's reasonable to feel.
Right.
Oh, right.
And so it's important that the law in every one of these states says the same thing. It's about a reasonable suspicion, a reasonable fear.
Well, here's the thing, and this was what was telling about our discussion with our DA, Steve Kunzweiler, was that he struggled with whether or not, and he was fairly familiar with the case, and given our explanation of filling in some of the blanks, he was still a bit confused and not sure as to whether or not they actually trespassed. And the point was they were not after a fleeing suspect, so how could you have it any other way? Now, mind you, this is the mindset of our law enforcement and justice system employees.
Exactly.
And so the point is that it's the same thing in Fort Worth as it is here. You've got people who are confused about it, who don't get the situation right, who don't look at it, who are in top positions even, and this is not a criticism of Steve because it was still fresh news when we were talking about it last Tuesday, but the point is that if it's this much of a question, then we have a rethink as a society to do. Because they come from us, and it's we as a society who have to rethink these things and get our minds wrapped right about who's really right in these kinds of things.
True that. I'm Tom McCarron, your host. I got 2 out of the 3 Davids today for 3D Politics every Monday at 7 p.m. David Van, David Oldham. We're missing Broso tonight. What else on this national?
I do want to follow up on this important thing. In Oldham, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think you're going to agree. our constitutional right, Fourth Amendment, against unreasonable search and seizure doesn't apply just to our dwelling, but to our private property.
Well, actually, it says your person, place, and effect, or person, property, and effects.
Right. So again, they would need a search warrant unless they have probable cause. Need a search warrant in order to do any search.
Yes.
You know, so to me, now I understand the going and knocking at somebody's door or something like that. Right. But, yeah, and again, to that. But to go around in the back, they are clearly doing an unconstitutional search.
Well, they're not only going to do that, but then the looking in the window is unconstitutional because they're in the back. That's just like a stalker does, or, the peeping Tom. Those are crimes for these very reasons.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter that you had a good reason to be there. You know, you wear a badge and somebody called. The point is, nobody in the house knows that you're there. So,
wanted to say about our conversation with Steve Kunzweiler, which was last Tuesday night at the Tulsa Area Republican Assembly, because I pressed him on the other issue, the famous issue of, if you're paying for sex and victimizing women, we're coming after you.
Arresting the Johns.
Yes, and giving counseling to the sex workers, but not arresting them. And
who's training these sex workers?
Yeah, and I said, Steve, you're setting up a sanctuary city for prostitutes. And, Steve didn't really want to engage me on that. All he said is, I'll be able to say a whole lot more in the course of the trial and afterwards, but his general narrative of, he says, this is not like the sex workers that you see in the movies where it's a high-priced prostitute, with her client list that she rotates. He says, no, these are people that are doing the sex work in conditions which leads us very much to believe that they're not there willfully. And my argument with that is, well, then you've got slavery. Because
abuse situation,
human trafficking in and of itself, and I gave him the story about the coyotes that were dumping people off next door to me. This construction company owner had owned the house next to me, and I didn't know what was going on for about 6 months. But again, that was human trafficking in the construction trade. They were there willfully. They signed up for it, but again, it's still human trafficking. And I'm like, why are you not going after them? Instead, you're going after the sex workers.
Right.
Right. So, I think I said something like, if I have my house roofed, by an illegal, are you going to arrest me for that too?
Remember the old commercial where it's like, I'm a drug addict and I stole my mother's VCR to buy drugs? Okay, if you're a drug addict, the minute you steal your mother's VCR, now you're a thief.
Yeah,
It doesn't matter if drugs have it doesn't matter what your situation is. Well, if there is a human abuse situation that is causing a woman to make the bad decision of prostitution, you need to arrest the person who's abusing the person.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Now that may be the Johns as well.
Oh, they're not pristine in this scenario either.
But whether or not they have actually committed a crime is yet a question.
Yeah, I know.
And that will probably have to wait for another day, and that's going to tease some people off. But the point is, they may be committing crimes, but their crimes will be later in the game, like when they go home. But and take whatever they bring home with them, those kinds of things, because then they do commit a crime against another. Yeah. But the point is that a John doesn't necessarily commit a crime because there's not actually an assault or a crime against another. It's a consensual behavior.
Yeah, and I want to say, I'm sure you're preparing for your own video series on constitutional rights and that. I'm sure this is an issue you're going to have to explain in depth. You can't do this in 2 minutes or a segment.
No. It's much more difficult, and people are not going to like it. But you know what? It is what it is.
Yeah, and then the other thing Kunzweiler did Tuesday night was this narrative of if you're consuming marijuana, even if it's medical marijuana, you're going to become violent. And
Right.
it was
Right.
And get ready. This next session, he's going to be speaking to the legislature on this, and he's got this book that, boy, it's all the ammunition he needs. And it was
David,
laughable.
David D'Ambroso, you were right. He wouldn't answer my question.
Yes.
And that was who owns the marijuana that grows naturally on your land, and he didn't want to answer that one.
Right. So it was an interesting Tuesday night, wasn't it?
It was an interesting,
yeah.
but this all goes to show how much work we as a society have to do, because we elect these kinds of people.
Yes.
And whether it's at our city councils who hire the police chief, like in Fort Worth,
Yes.
where they then train their officers and allow at the administrative level, allow these kinds of things. Or, as we're going to find out, happens right here in Tulsa, that literally the chief of police is guilty of maladministration because of what his sergeants and others do.
Yeah, and that's why I have to call for term limits on DAs, because I've never seen a DA be a better public servant in his second or third or fourth term than he was in his first. I think 8 years max. I tell you, it gives you a tainted view of society that then affects how you go after people. And I've seen the poor abused. I'm not talking minority. I'm talking about the poor.
Sure.
Get abused because they can't lawyer up to fight it.
Right.
Okay.
Wonderful country that we have, that you guys are able to access the DA and be able to sit and speak
It
with him. I
is.
mean,
Oh, yeah.
there's some countries you can't get that close to.
Well,
your
he's a powerful member of society,
There
so
you
I
go.
just take
Yeah,
one.
right. I'll take the crumbs. Now, Tom McKay here hosting 3D Politics. David Van, David Oldham. I want to bring this up here because it's got all my little notes from Sooner Politics. We're going to move on to the OKGOP. I'm not going to try to pour through this Al Gerhardt novel, but he had a lot of stuff in there. Seems like he's following it pretty hard. But tell us the basic upshots of this McLean versus Turner. And apparently Amanda Teagarden was on the air speaking about it.
Mm-hmm. You want to take this?
Oh, really? Oh, I hadn't heard that Amanda had been on.
Well,
I don't know anything about it, and frankly, I don't much care.
I was hoping you'd take the question
Here's
instead
the
of
point.
me.
Here's the point. The Oklahoma Republican Party has abandoned constitutional values for the most part. David McLean does get it, and he does claim to follow those values and promote them. I don't know. I'm not with him all the time. But it appears in this particular case that that things have been done which may border on criminal behavior, improper behavior. And if that's the case, then I say bring the charges as necessary. Frankly, there's nothing I can mention that's constitutional about the issue, so I don't have much to say. I lose interest pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think, and there's something, we don't even have a story on it typed up and put in because it's just broke about an hour ago. KOTV and KWTV Channel 9 Oklahoma City both carried it. A bookkeeper who was fired at the beginning of the month it has come forward and provided all of these records, which are the basis for the charges of mismanagement of funds, going deep in debt and stuff, and paying airfare for people to go to East Coast meetings multiple times who we never pay for, like spouses and staffers, when we don't even pay for our national committee women to go to the meeting that they're a part of.
Right.
But this one had to do tonight with a letter that was produced to Channel 6 that said a job's been offered to Mike McCutcheon, who's just recently moved over there, was our county chairman before McLean over here, actually about,
4 years ago.
4 years, earlier. And McCutcheon was supposedly offered a job making it's part-time, $1,250 a month, according to this letter, And the bookkeeper said, okay, wanted to know, do I have to handle this in payroll too? And according to her statement on the air was that Tom DeMont told her and another office staffer, no, we just wrote that to help him get a mortgage on his house he's buying and disregard that. Well, that's mortgage fraud. And if you're complicit in that, that's a problem. And so now there's...
Not that Mike McCutcheon would have any problem paying the mortgage in the first place.
Well, we don't know that.
But the point is, or that we suspect that he would have any problems, but the point is that it is fraudulent behavior. Now, mind you, in the mortgage industry, these kinds of things are done all the time. But if it's criminal, if it's against the law, if you're defrauding a mortgage bank, and if it did come down to that it was fraud, that's an absolute crime.
Okay, so this is the problem that we're seeing, and evidently I talked to one source as we were taping. He said, yeah, he's seen the police report on, so that's been done, and the district attorney's office is getting it, but the vice chair is asking also for the AG's office to investigate it as well. Find out. If it's nothing, it's nothing. If it's something, then again, we don't have the kind of oversight of even a budget committee.
I'm just amazed that you just can't keep track of where your money's going.
Well, here's the problem. In the first few months after you elect a new chairman, you have to have a budget committee in place that puts together a proposed budget that's then presented to the presiding big committee that we just call the state committee. Okay, I know it can be confusing talking about all these committees. But the budget committee then presents something that they think is prudent. The state committee, by authorizing them, then that puts perimeters around spending by your state office, including your chairman.
Right.
And if that had happened, if we had impaneled that, and whose job is it? It is the chair and vice chair's job to get that done. That's by the rules is supposed to come up in our June meeting. Well, we had the June meeting, not a word. Okay, August meetings coming up. McLean called me in August and asked me to serve on it, and then come the first meeting, and I wasn't invited to the meeting. I found out without notice. I was taken off of it.
Lucky you.
Yeah, it could be because of one of my journalist friends. I don't know. They're taking it out on me. I don't know. But again,
a Russian asset.
Nobody talked to me. I was just taken off of it. So I go to that first committee meeting, which happened in mid-August, and Gary Jones, the chairman of, again, Gary Jones, a very reputed, respected former state chair and state auditor, served 8 years. May have been our best state auditor. I don't know. But anyway, he said, folks, we just met 2 nights ago. We don't have a budget for you. Fact is, we'll try our best to have a budget in November, but that'll be a budget for next year. So we're just going to go all this year with no budget, which means the chairman just spends however. That's fine if you're in the black, right? I didn't know we had a credit card with a pretty high credit balance, what do you call it? Your credit line?
Oh, right.
Yeah, so ends up, McLean said this on the radio on Thursday when pressed by Pat Campbell. He was trying to present this. No, we got $20,000 in the bank. Well, yeah, that was a bailout. We found that out. It was the RNC covering because on Monday, a story came out about we're heap big debt. Right. And of course, he called for the vice chairman's resignation for lying when the vice chair said we're in debt. That would be Mike Turner.
Okay.
So then Turner gets on Friday, and again, Thursday, Pat Campbell just, it was horrible. David McLean had a really tough time with that interview, and I'm just saying, because he said, what are you doing? Credit card debt. He said, why don't you go to the bank and get a loan? Well, McLean said, nobody's going to give us a loan. First of all, he couldn't get a loan without the budget committee approving the budget and the state committee authorizing us to seek the loan. That would mean working with the organization.
You can't commit a little fraud, you alone.
Yeah, I know. Well, it seems they've been trying on this mortgage.
Yeah, everything else you're doing works that way.
So we've got some real problems here, and now Turner, I've got problems with Turner, but I've got problems with my own state committee, which I have to take part of the responsibility for. You know, nobody's done everything perfect here. Nobody.
Nope.
But, you know, I talked to Turner today about it, and I said, you know, you really should have started by notifying the state committee of what you had before you went to the media.
Exactly.
He said, you're right. He says, it wasn't that I talked to too many people. I didn't talk to enough people. And yes, he says, that's a fair critique. I should have gone to the state committee. Once you do that, it's out there because, you know, it's the media's going to get their hands on it, you know, within minutes. So that's...
Well, but then he's not the focus. At this point,
right.
it's Estela Hernandez, you know, 0.2, you know, times 2 or whatever, part due. And
yeah.
because that's what it is it looks like it's infighting, and that the information has dribbled out. If you've got all this information, then put it out there.
Yeah,
don't dribble it.
And again, that information, according to our fired bookkeeper, came from her. You know, she's the one that put it out, and then she's gone repeatedly back to Griffin Communications, News 9, News 6, you know, here in Tulsa, and the sister station. So, you know, she's been putting it out there, and, you know, of course, you know, she's the one that gave it to Turner as well. So,
now, Griffin is with KFAQ, or
yes,
okay,
yes, they're all the yes. In fact, David was referring to the alt media as trying to bring him down, which well, I don't know who that is. We got a Randy Crable article on Monday. We've got Channel 9, and then we got Pat Campbell here. And I guess you.
Well, I think it started with the alt. We know about that. It started with the alt because that's where it started, and then people picked it up, and now it's gone mainstream.
Yeah, it is, and it really comes down to.
But hey, if there's a story here, then it proves that it takes the alt to get it done, because these guys got it from the people you got it from, who you know. And that's why people are upset.
Yeah, and you know, it's and you know, all the name calling, disparaging side, that to me doesn't really accomplish anything. It's, are the facts true or are they not? When it comes down to it, it's about that. You've got to put up or shut up. And there were some facts here. Clearly, it was a failure of this administration to set up the proper structure so you'd have the proper framework to avoid debtful spending in secret, avoid inappropriate expenditures like, I think I want my wife to go with me to D.C. and we'll stay at, you know, a nice hotel. I talked to one blogger from Muskogee who said, he says, listen, you don't have to spend $400 a night in a hotel. He says, my wife and I went Airbnb, and we had a whole house for $100 a night.
Yeah.
You know,
wow.
Yeah. If you want,
Depends on where you're going.
Well, no, he said that was DC.
What?
Yes, the blogger I talked to said no.
Well, I want to talk to him.
I know, exactly. I know somebody could be a travel
Especially
agent.
if it was nice, because we stayed at a house that cost a lot more than that.
Right.
John's going to get arrested here.
Well, it depends. Are you going there during inauguration when you went?
No. I stayed for free when I was there.
So yeah, it was clearly some really bad spending. In fact, did you get a mailer this week from Victory 2020? Anyway,
check the mail.
A whole bunch of us got mail. Actually, it was the end of last week, and it was a nice solicitation funds from Matt Pinnell. Really well done. Matt knows how to do it.
Right.
But I'm like, God, you picked a terrible week to send that out, because what kind of response are we going to get on our mailing expense? Because, I mean, you're spending the better part of $1 per letter to send these out, and everybody's seeing the news and the newspaper and everything. Yeah. It's a tough deal. So now here's finally, gonna get to a point. On my way over here tonight to the studio, I was talking to a member of the budget committee, and he told me, he says, Dave, right now our rules do not allow for the budget committee to call themselves in the meeting.
Oh, okay.
It's got to come from the chairman. And by not calling the budget committee in, the budget cannot be created to constrain the chairman.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That seems to be a little shortcoming.
Yes.
Just a minor.
And so he says,
overlooked
Dave,
detail.
next state convention, you and I, we're going to make a rule. Can't do this. And then, but
And we know David likes rules.
yeah. And so anyway, well, the other thing he said, he called the members of the state committee, state central committee, there's 4 of them, you know, and he said, you know, he's going to give them at most 48 hours to get this budget. Somebody's got to show some leadership. And so this member of the budget committee, I'll name him, Seth Rott, the former EA for Brian Crane. He's now a lobbyist, and he's a member of both the executive committee and budget committee. And he said, until somebody moves the ball, we're stuck in a quagmire. And so he says, if we don't get something like that in 48 hours, he says, let's circulate a petition amongst the state committee members, because us members of state committee can, by petition, 25%.
Right.
We can call us into state committee, and then the members who do that petition, they get to list the agenda. What's going to happen at this meeting. Not the chair, vice chair. So hats off to Seth for doing that.
Hats off to David for knowing all that
well,
stuff.
yeah, well, listen, you know, Seth, he says, Dave, you know, you and I used to really fight a lot. We still don't agree on much. But I'm glad that we're actually working together civilly, because the party needs some kind of structure and order right now. So, yeah.
Very true.
And there's a bunch of people I'd like to commend right now for helping to move this towards what may be some good resolutions. And we're going to be commending some people in the weeks to come. Again, like I told you guys last week when we talked about this, I said this is probably going to reach ahead very, very soon.
Right.
And was I right?
It did.
Yeah.
Well, it hasn't quite popped yet, but.
All right, we're going to move on with some state news from Sooner Politics. The Tulsa cops defy state law. They threaten the arrest of Oklahoma 2A President Don Spencer.
Yeah.
So tell us what happened.
You want me to take this?
Well, yeah,
Okay.
you can.
Okay.
Did you
It
put
was
it up
Oktoberfest.
on
This is from Sooner
Oklahoma-
Politics.
On Sooner? Okay.
Sooner Politics, it's also, I shared it to 3
He visited
Politics.
with at least 6 uniformed personnel at the Oktoberfest on River Parks.
Yeah.
Yes.
Attempted to show several officers the laws that bans tenants from leasing the parks and denying citizens the right to defend their lives. He's saying he has the constitutional right to carry his arms, and they weren't going to let him do it.
Well, it's more than a constitutional right. It's a
Statutory.
right that's written in statute.
Yeah.
And what was interesting was the final guy who wanted to arrest him and actually pushed him to the street was Officer Chris Witt.
Yep.
And WITT. Didn't get a badge number.
I think it was 557. I remember. He finally gave it. Yeah, it was a 3-digit. Had 5s in there.
Well, watch the video, folks, because calls need to be made to the police department and directed at the police chief, because the police chief is ultimately guilty of this, and all of your city councilmen, because they are guilty for allowing the police chief to remain.
Yes.
They hire the police chief. They are guilty. They want to divert attention from themselves, and their oath of office requires them to hold the police chief accountable. Mm-hmm. And they want to divert that with this whole OIM office and board and all of that.
Right.
They don't get such a pass. But this Witt said, I don't care about the law.
Yeah.
When confronted with the law, he says, I don't care about that. Get out of here, or you're under arrest.
Yeah. Now, our friend Tim Harper did get arrested down at that same location. He put up his video of it. So yes, it is happening. It was the same Officer Witt. Yeah. I have some other problems with it. They're using retired cops and then throwing uniforms on them. And keep in mind, those cops are not actually there on duty. Most of them are they're rent-a-cops.
Right.
But they're allowing them to wear shirts that say Tulsa Police Department, which I believe is
And doesn't say retired underneath the badge or anything.
And I'm just thinking, let's print us ourselves some T-shirts to say that. See if we get by with
Well,
it.
hey, we're just as much a cop as they are.
Yeah, thank you. So,
Constitutionally
but
speaking.
statutorily, it's banned to present yourself as being a municipal law enforcement if you're not. That's in the statutes.
Right.
So we got that part of it. Don Spencer did something that I want to commend. He had his video going, not just one, but he had 2 cameras going. And this is really important. In fact, he had one that was kind of hidden. I don't know, it was a GoPro or something.
No, he has it right here on his
does
chest.
he? Okay,
he goes everywhere.
But he's holding this cell phone, trying to make you think that's the one. I think he wants to have a dummy one or something.
Well, he may have had that, but he goes around with a regular body cam.
Yeah.
Kind of a device, and it's pretty big.
Okay, badge cam, probably like the cops use.
Well, but it's like this size.
It's a big one,
It's a big one.
So,
You can't miss it.
You just, folks, when you're trying to stand up for your rights and you have a reasonable belief that you might be challenged, get some tape, some video of it.
And yes, if you're working this, and thankfully we have people like Tim Harper, Rick Hubbard, Don Spencer, and people like that who are exercising their rights and catching footage of how the police are selectively choosing what laws they will uphold and what laws they will ignore. Because when it comes to our rights, they very conveniently forget those and ignore those. But when it comes to, and this is weird because it's in statute. They always claim they have to follow the statute.
Yeah.
But, it's not about the Constitution. If it's about that, I have to follow the statutes, fix the statutes. As though, somehow they have a right because it's in statute to go and violate rights.
Just do my job. Yeah.
And that is their MO. But then when confronted with statute that says the opposite of what they want, then all of a sudden they want their cake and eat it too,
right? And
they're just going to ignore the statute.
Yeah. So Don gets credit for that, and I hope he does file a lawsuit. I believe he can go with tort law, and it's going to cost
Harper and Hubbard as well.
It's going to cost the city dearly, but you know what? How else are you going to get their attention? That our civil rights have value. And we're going to see them as valuable.
Well, and this happened after we had our talk with Steve Kunzweiler. But Steve, if you're watching, what are you doing about this? Because this is a criminal action. This was battery. It was threat of force. It was terroristic threats to be battered, have handcuffs slapped on you, have your stuff gone through illegally, and then be thrown in jail potentially.
Yeah.
That was the threat.
Yeah.
So the question is, what is being done by the higher-ups and by the people that would hold these people accountable? City councilors.
Yeah.
Cass Farr. What are you doing? We've had this discussion. What is the mayor, G.T. Bynum, doing? He's directly responsible for this. What's the police chief doing?
Okay.
He's sworn an oath.
Let's say they had a different rule up there, like at Oktoberfest. That's what the event was. So it was a private entity that was leasing the property, and our laws say it doesn't matter. You can still charge admission, and you can remove people for cause, and that, but not their constitutional rights. You can't take away from them.
Correct.
Where the law says you cannot. It's just like if we had a sign above Oktoberfest that says no gays allowed. Or no Chinese, no Asians allowed.
No free speech.
Yeah, and things like this. What would happen? Because your right to self-protection under the Second Amendment is just as much a constitutional right as your right to equal protection under the law.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So anyway, kudos to Steve or to Don Spencer. OK2A, and he's a lobbyist. Fact is, he was shown in the law, And, don't argue with
He's
what's
the
there.
one who wrote
He's
it.
the one that wrote them, okay? He writes all of them, So,
he knew full well that it was in
Yeah.
there. Well, what was interesting was that if watch the video, because you will see he says that he reads the law to them that they cannot, that no private entity can make the public park no longer public, because that's their excuse. It's like it's a private event, so therefore it's a private.
Well, wait a minute. Are you saying that they have to let everybody in,
No,
or
in
can
terms
they charge
in terms
admission?
of they can charge admission.
Yeah.
But the point is that the park remains a park, and you cannot, as the private party using the park, deny people their constitutional rights just because it's now your private.
Which is the same problem we ran into at the rally.
Yeah.
Yes. Because we didn't have a right to exclude them either.
Yeah, we'll be talking about
we're going to come up with that.
Shuffling.
Yes.
Don Spencer did another thing that I thought was admirable. Another person standing up for the Second Amendment right to keep and bear arms was found in violation of yet another statutory law that says, no, you can't have loaded guns in your car. And this is a dear friend of this show, Adam Modisette. So there's a warrant out for his arrest. He shows up at the courthouse to attend the budget board meeting, and a whole bunch of sheriff's deputies arrest him on the spot. He goes to jail, gets to honor the holy Sabbath, the Jewish law of Sukkot, by living in temporary dwellings to remember the former bondage.
His present
bondage.
Touché.
And I want to give a shout out to Julia Zell, who's used to be a lawyer for the other side, the deep state. And you'll have to Google that. But she reached out through a friend to me, and I got him in touch with some of our friends with the OTU bunker, Adam Lopez, or Andrew Lopez, and we got him. She got him posted bail. And this is somebody. Moto actually was not arrested for the gun crime.
No, he was
it was a misdemeanor. Citation is all it is. But it was for not showing up in court. Now to David, I want to say this, a judge can never rule on the side of the person who doesn't show up for court.
Actually, he has a duty to dismiss the case just on the very fact that of this particular case. This particular case, Moto was stopped for a traffic violation, or a supposed traffic violation, and the gun came up in the discussion and so forth. Do you have a license? And so you know where I'm going to go with this. And
have no idea.
No, I have my Second Amendment, and at that point he was the gun was stolen, confiscated, and then he was issued the citation to then show up in court. Now, mind you, the citation itself was illegal, and whether he showed up or not, he has no duty to show up to an illegal citation. None. Because the everything is already stacked against you. Because it's an unconstitutional citation.
How do you know how that judge is going to adjudicate, though?
The point is, it doesn't matter. The point is, the only reason you show up to court is to get your gun back, because your gun was illegally taken. There was nothing lawful about what the cop did in the first place. Nothing.
Okay. You know Randy Weaver's case, Ruby Ridge, famous from many years ago.
Right.
He was in that confrontation, which turned out to be deadly for his family. He lost his wife, lost his son. And it was because he didn't show up for court. They didn't notify him that, in fact, he showed up for court and there was no court, and they never told him. So then they come to arrest him, much like this, a warrant, and that it was over a shotgun charge.
Right.
Where the buyer in a sting operation was begging him, please, cut it off this short. And he said, well, the law says I can cut it this. I ain't going to buy it unless you cut it an inch shorter. It was a setup. It was a sting.
Right.
But again, he tried to show up in court.
Right.
To make his case for the constitutional rights. My position on this is you don't get to become your own judge when it comes to, because I don't think Jefferson or Adams would go that far as to say, well, if you believe that you have a constitutional right, then your reading of the Constitution now precludes you having to go before a judge.
Well, here's the point. Here's the problem, and this is the problem with unconstitutional laws, is that the case came before the judge. Okay? That judge saw that case. Just because the defendant wasn't there doesn't make the case any stronger for the defense. There is nothing lawful about a gun possession charge. Nothing, never has been, never will be. You always, unless you are a legitimate felon, you cannot be denied arms. And that's exactly what these licenses and these citations do, is they deny you before you have ever done anything wrong, your right to the weapon. And that has to be dismissed on its face and with prejudice.
Have you ever?
And you don't have to be there for that.
Okay. Have you ever known a judge to actually adjudicate the way you're
I don't
describing
care.
It
It doesn't matter.
I want to know.
He's looking at probability of mathematics.
Well, there's a big difference between what must be and what the current practice are, and the practicality or the pragmatism involved. Those have to be separated, and that's vital to understand when we have these conversations.
The reason why I say that is if we do have record of such a thing, it would be very instructive, wouldn't it?
What's that?
If you saw a judge that says, yeah, he's not here and I don't blame him, this is an unconstitutional law, I'm throwing it out.
Well, that would be very instructive.
But again, yeah, you know,
it would be commendable on
I was hoping we had some case, some corollary, something that would help us to better understand.
I don't.
So you're saying, judges, you be the first. He'll make a hero out of you.
Well, we're just recapping the story of Ray Motoset's arrest from a News 9 story, October 18th. Tell us about it. Updated the 20th.
Well, before we got cut off, we were discussing why somebody might not show up to a court date and be perfectly legitimate. Okay. And what I was trying to elaborate on is that our laws and the people who are enforcing them are corrupt. And because of this corruption, there is very little chance that you are going to receive actual justice. Certainly not constitutional justice, which is what we're looking for. Because every single attorney in Oklahoma, a practicing attorney, the only ones allowed to represent you before the courts, according to the Bar Association rules, or even the law, Oklahoma law, the only ones allowed to represent you must be a bar member, a Bar Association member, which is a quasi de facto form of licensure. Yeah. And what it does is it adds a chilling effect. As I have personally discovered when I was seeking lawyers, it adds a chilling effect to actually defending on constitutional grounds. Yeah. Because if you do so and the Supreme Court doesn't like that because they are the gatekeepers keeping the whole scheme going, you are at a complete disadvantage from the lowest judge all the way to the Supreme Court and every person who appears before them as a practicing attorney. So the chilling effect is really, really cold, and there's very little expectation, virtually nil, that you will receive justice in a court. In this particular case, the judge did get the case before him, and rather than throwing it out on constitutional grounds, which he had the duty to do, and didn't do. Instead, he ordered a warrant, signed a warrant for the non-appearance. Okay. That is a complete sham and a complete
I wanna-
abstraction from justice.
I want to channel my inner D'Ambroso here and say that, yeah, but you know, these are all hoodlums and crooks that don't get their
That's what I just
carry.
said.
Yeah. And you know, if that's what we have to do to get crime off the streets, then they're doing a good thing. That's what D'Ambroso would say, right?
That would be what he would say. And the point is that yes, then all us deplorables clinging to our guns and our Bibles are criminals. Because that is literally what they are saying. And I've said this before right here on this show, but our prisons are filled with political prisoners.
Yes.
And why? Because they, the government, the people involved in this scheme, in all these various schemes, have turned ordinary law-abiding people into criminals.
Yeah.
Who have done nothing to any other person. We as a society need to start recognizing this and put pressure on them.
I got a case in point. Carol Howe. I don't know if you remember from the Oklahoma City bombing back in '95. Okay. She had formerly been part of this white supremacist group.
Okay.
She's a young woman who was adopted into a family of considerable wealth in Tulsa area. Bob and Aubin Howe. I know them because I worked on their house. They were clients of mine, you know, and so in her, you know, post-high school, you know, sowing her wild oats, she hung out with a bad crowd, and then she kind of got out of that, got her life cleaned up, and then the FBI came calling. We want you to be a federal informant to try to help us investigate some white supremacist group that we think are involved in this. So she goes out to Elohim City in Arkansas, which is where this, you know, kind of a compound is, where a bunch of them, and, you know, she's hanging out with them. Meanwhile, they arrest Timothy McVeigh and Nichols and that whole bunch, and so now they're getting the trial ready, and she's done with what she's supposed to do. And then she's been an undercover informant, right? So in the midst of discovery with the defense for McVeigh and Nichols and that, the FBI screws up. Well, it's the Justice Department, federal prosecutors, and they reveal her identity.
Oh, great.
And now she's got a bunch of, you know, pretty admitted thugs, right? And she's got to decide, what do I do? And the FBI says, oh, we'll put you into our witness protection program.
I love
yeah.
that.
By the way, I know your adopted child here, and this is Aubin and Bob are the only family you have. You'll say goodbye to them for the rest of your lives. You'll never see mommy and daddy, who are well-to-do, you know. And so, and all that. And she's like, I got to decide. These people already screwed me over once, the Justice Department. And that. So she decides to go on her own. No, I am going to prove they're lying, and I am going to go deeper into this group. So she starts living with one of the guys in it. And he is, you know, I would say, you know, got some attitudes on race that are pretty unfavorable. I wouldn't ascribe to him. And this is back in the technologies of the mid-'90s when we actually had phone answering machines, you know, with tapes and reel. And well, he's got this recording where he does messages, and one of the messages sounded like it was inciting violence. At least the feds thought so. And so they're going after both Aubin and Carol Howe, young Carol Howe, and this fella for inciting racial violence. Now, I heard the tape, and a lot of people, really? So they tried the fella first. He ain't got any money. He's got a public defender. He's in for 15 years.
Right.
Then they try Carol. Carol and her parents decide that they're going to try their chances with a young unknown attorney called Clark Brewster.
Yeah.
This is before Clark was Clark, okay? Clark destroyed the federal government's argument. By the time they got done, she was totally exonerated of all of it. The FBI looked like a bunch of idiots, and it was like, now she's got a case to go after the FBI and for civil damages, right?
Right.
And that. So they get done with that, And then finally, some ACLU attorney goes to this live-in boyfriend and says, let's file an appeal. They didn't even argue. They said, let the guy out. Because it was so clear. This is the point. If you've got lots of money, you can argue for your civil rights.
Right.
But the way our judicial system is, you get the best justice money can buy.
Right.
And that's why I say the poor get abused by our system.
Oh, yes.
Because the courts, in fact, this last primary, House District 12, Nick Mahoney decided to appeal it, get a recount.
Mm-hmm.
The judge said, okay, the trial is such and such, and you have to get an attorney. He said, I don't want an attorney. I don't know. If we're going to do this, you have to hire an attorney. They made him hire an attorney.
Right. And again, that's unconstitutional. I want to know about these kinds of abuses because Constitutional Grounds wants to start keeping a record of these kinds of things because they happen all the time. We want to know when they are seating an illegitimate jury.
Yeah.
Where they are holding people to account and excusing people who would dismiss a charge on constitutional grounds.
Yeah.
Those people absolutely should be sitting on the jury because you can't get a fair jury.
Yeah.
And that's when you have a jury trial. Most of these things never make it there because their counsel is so corrupt.
Yeah, no, and it's not just in those kinds of criminal law cases, but I was asked by a family who was going through a very troubling time a month ago that the man in the family had mental health issues that were very severe. And now he had developed severe dementia. It looked like it was probably Alzheimer's. There was no way, and the mental health court judge, I know her, she was not going to let the guy out. But some long-term planning had to happen. And what happened is the wife called me and says, Dave, they won't even let me have his medical records, and they're citing HIPAA law thing, right? And
she's a guardian.
No, that's the thing.
No, she wasn't.
She says, I've got to find... Now, I've got the legal papers. We've done a living will in that, so it's in here saying I get it. But having the court procedure done. And she had no money.
Right.
And so,
probably cost her a minimum of $350.
So, no, that's exactly right. An attorney offered her, I can do your documents to file with the court clerk, probate department, for getting guardianship.
That's probably $1,000 something.
Well, no, that was $200 and some. So
that's cheap.
But here's my problem. You get the best justice your money can buy.
Right.
And this woman was just trying to say, just give me the ability to make the decisions to take care of them.
Right.
But if you don't have the money, that guy is homeless. He's gone. Okay? We're stacking our laws against families taking care of each other.
The idea that money works to your advantage is going to always be true.
It is.
And if we go the redistribution route, you won't get rid of the poor. You'll just move the wealth to the people who are calling the shots on who redistributes.
But we've got a different alternative. We set up our Oklahoma courts over the last 15 years to be dependent upon fees, court fees, any adjudication in criminal courts. Those fees are so great that we're getting people in debtor's prison now that are having to go back just because they couldn't keep up with their monthly payments on those fees. It's nuts. I mean, thousands of dollars. And now over in Wagner County, if they keep you in jail, they charge you $75 a night. Because they put you there.
That's
on top of that, and if you can't pay that, they send you back to jail so they can charge another $75 each night you're in there.
And it's all on the heads of these judges because these judges have allowed it. Because there's not one. I mean, if you're wrongly arrested and they still charge you, I'm sorry, no. Actually. You for all the time you've spent.
Okay, here's the problem. Everybody that's on the bench now is part of the barristry industry. Okay?
Yes.
Okay, they're all barristers, lawyers. And that just like all of your school teachers are part of the education industry, all your doctors are part of the healthcare industry, and every industry has within itself an effort to build the importance and the structure and our society's reliance on their industry.
Of course.
They're furthering their industry. Every high school teacher tells you to go to college. Why? Because the more people keep doing education, the more jobs there are at colleges, and maybe they'll be a college professor soon.
Well, exactly.
And so what I'm saying in this, it's just like all the doctors that are for Medicaid expansion, because it's just money in their pocket, right? So this is my problem with all of these judges setting it up so that you have to have an attorney.
Well, it's illegal.
Okay.
Because you always have the right to go pro se.
I'm working with a group right now over in Oklahoma City who they are now filing for the third time for a citizen's petition for a grand jury. And the judge keeps rejecting it and telling them they don't have this right. One time they said, "Oh, you didn't put your name and phone number in it." Well, you've got my name and phone number from this other form. It was just technical stuff. And this is the problem. They're setting it up so that the common man cannot access it. Like, who do we think we are?
Right.
You're not supposed to get a grand jury. Well, we have a district attorney that handles that.
Well, again, this comes down to, and there's nothing wrong with an industry trying to make itself important, make people believe that they're important.
At the expense of my civil rights?
The problem is that it's done by the hand of government.
Yes.
It turns government into a royal sovereign, basically,
yes,
under which we are subject.
Right.
And that is antithetical to anything in America.
Right.
That's the point. We put that off in 1776.
You came from California. The education industry got laws changed so that you can no longer educate your own kids. You have to turn it over to them.
Well, they tried to. That's why we came out here. But they tried to do that.
Everybody in California is living under that oppressive tyranny.
Well, yes, but it's not explicit in law because they haven't done away with homeschooling in California.
You've got to go through all kinds of structured stuff. You
to
have an umbrella organization there.
That's been the case for as long as I've known about it.
Yeah, about 20 years anyway. Yeah.
Oh, longer than that. But the point is that nothing since I left, nothing has really changed with homeschooling, other than that they were trying to. Dr. Richard Pan was trying to make it that every homeschooler had to go have a fire inspection in their home, so that some government employee could get in without a warrant and check things out.
Yeah.
Even though no other home had to have a fire inspection, it was going to be unique. And again, no equal protection under the laws, just a particular exercise of right earned you that visit. And so these are the kinds of things that we have got to do something about as a society. And it's going to take us as a society to do it. That's why we're talking about these things. And it's not pie in the sky, tinfoil hat weirdness. They are doing this every day. I mean, I talked about the conspiracy of the cops at with Don Spencer. It's right there on camera where they're all agreeing that they're what they're going to do and how they're going to treat Don or Tim, and they're all participating in it.
Yes.
It is a conspiracy, and it was caught on camera. It's not the conspiracy. Hey, well, if he does this, then we're going to do this and this and that and the other thing. No, but it's pretty implicit. And
I think the homeschoolers here in Oklahoma, though, they can have an NHRA drag queen read for the children. It's time to move
Bring
on,
us back.
and let's just slay this thing as fast as we can. We're going to move on. I'm Tom McKay, your 3D Politics host, with 2 out of the 3 Davids. I got David Van with SoonerPolitics.org and David Oldham with constitutionalgrounds.com. This last Thursday we had an exciting rally at Veterans Park, and I want to tell you that the 3 guys that really were the heroes were 3 homeless veterans. There's a friend of mine named Rick, a.k.a. Rico. He's a veteran of the Navy, and he helps out the local veterans, especially the ones that are down on their luck. Well, I didn't know it, but he came out with 3 of his homeless friends, veterans, Joe and Ken, and another guy named David. They helped me set up all the wires, and a lot of things that isn't getting reported is that the power was cut. That is the Frank Grove and Eli Green, your 2 disturbers. They came and yanked someone of their group, pulled the power for our microphones.
Did we find out it was their group?
I have. Whoever came to disrupt our party, and Frank Grove admits he came there to disrupt our party. So I would suggest it's Frank Grove, Eli Green, or one of their friends or cohorts. But the fact is, 3 homeless veterans, not only did they help me set up, but the reason the power kept going and all of our speakers were well amplified, and that well amplified sound cut out all of the noise in the background mostly, it was because Ken, a homeless veteran, sat there and guarded the power.
Yeah.
While Joe helped me do everything else and David followed up on the cleanup. Yeah. So we had 3 homeless vets were the real heroes of the show, and if we wouldn't have had power, then Frank Grove and Eli Green would have been able to disrupt quite a bit more. The real standout speakers, one of the things that was totally overlooked was what our speakers said. And I got to tell you, the real standout kid that I just loved was this, he's got a double major, Evan Shaw. Did you hear him?
Yeah.
This Evan Shaw guy, this guy is amazing. TU, double major, psychology and economics. This guy is amazing. I loved his message because I thought he flew in the face of some of the other messages. I heard some of the speakers say that half of America hates this country. Well, I don't think that's true. And I think what Evan Shaw was saying was that the media pretends those lies to us. There were 2 people that were coming out to ruin our party with a few of their friends. And really, that's not half the country. So Evan Shaw did a great job. He talked about some of the Herbert Swope, a quote from Herbert Swope: "Try to please everybody, it equals failure. For true patriots to be silent is dangerous." That's a Samuel Adams quote. These were some of the great stuff I saw from Evan Shaw. What did you guys think about that rally?
Well, I was there. I am not a fanatic for Donald Trump. I was there to talk about constitutional grounds, wearing my Make America Constitutional Again hat, and talking with people about what we need to do to make America constitutional. Yeah. I will disagree with you, Tom, that half of America hates, or half of Americans hate. I think it's way more than that, because they hate the Constitution and they don't follow it, and they don't push for it, and partly because so many are caught up in all the illegal schemes set up by the government, and therefore they push and whine and moan about the destruction of these, or the ending of these programs.
I want to say something.
I'm publishing a couple of pictures from that party while I was there.
I want to say it would be nice if they were honest enough to say what you're alleging about hating the Constitution. I think they're self-delusional and saying, no, they are the defenders of the Constitution.
Oh, I guarantee you that.
Yeah.
But the point is, whatever your reason for stepping away from the Constitution, again, there's no ignorance before the law is no excuse. We have a very simple law here. Basically, let alone, let others be. Don't force your will on others. Yeah. It's really pretty simple, but people want to force their will on others. I had somebody I was talking to today who demands that Medicaid be expanded. And the question is, at whose cost? Yeah. But they demand it, and that demonstrates the hatred of their fellow Americans. Sure. And you can't have love for America and hate Americans.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it just doesn't work.
It really comes down to selfishness.
Yes.
Yeah, it's at the core of it.
Yes.
You know? And because they're not against the Constitution, they're against the Constitution not allowing them to be more selfish. They love the Constitution for the rights it does give them. Now they just claim that there's rights not in the Constitution that ought to be, like all the health care that I can sit in a waiting room and wait for.
Well, but the thing is, they also deny the Constitution because they deny your Second Amendment right. They deny your right to your own property because they demand it.
But they want their First Amendment right.
Well, of course, they want it. They don't want you to have it.
Exactly.
They want
it's
it.
that selfishness.
And so the point is that I think that's the key thing is that when people are selfish, when they are not concerned as much for their neighbor as for themselves, then we have a major problem, and that is the root of all of our issues. It's at the root of all of our issues, that money.
Yeah. Now, I want to say my take on, actually, I stopped by. I was on my way to a board meeting for mental health group, NAMI, and I went, you know, I got a chance to see you guys. I saw that little tent over there by the curb, you know, and I did not recognize Frank being there. Frank's somebody I've actually worked with last year on some legislative initiatives, and you know the interesting thing was I thought I was getting somewhere with him because when I showed him that the left is just as much an enemy of liberty as what he perceived the religious right. You know, the blue law thinking right in that, and I said you can't let. You know, you got to be careful of both sides.
Correct.
You know, and he bought that, and so much so that when we were at a board meeting later after that, I said, "So what's next for you?" He said, "I want to keep working on liberty issues with you." Now that was a year ago. Now Frank's with Antifa, and as a result, this week, the very next morning when I saw that 6:30 in the morning. I issued my resignation from the board where, you know, because, again, we're not on the same page and we can't proceed together on that.
Well, and so. I got off on my little rant, and so I didn't finish up. So
we're here.
My point was that I was there as pretty much an observer.
Yeah.
And not an outright participant. I've been accused of being a diehard Trump supporter. But my point was that I was being fair. And nothing would have happened if they'd have kept silent or kept a distance, and then they could have yelled, but without interrupting and attempting to verbally disrupt the event. Yeah. Later on, they were trying to march through with their flags. Mm-hmm. And only because other people came in and bodily kept them from doing that did that not happen.
Wait a minute, isn't that what we have police for?
This was a poorly set up event. We did not have control of the perimeter. We didn't have control of the sight line. People came to purposefully disrupt, and we had no way to stop anybody from getting anything backstage.
Well, the one thing that I did notice was that our lying, let's use Trump's words, lying fake media jumped right into it when scuffles did break out, and it was only to keep them from disrupting verbally and keep them out of walking over people. I got involved when they actually were running into people. They were running around between people. They were tripping over people who were sitting there. They ended up knocking one guy in the side of the head with their flag. I think it was inadvertent, but if they hadn't been there, it wouldn't have been an issue. Sure. The guy who was sitting there had been there the whole time. It was them coming through as the issue. So I then even got involved and was like, no, you're not coming in. You're staying right out here. Mm-hmm. and because at that point it's an issue of harm to others. Yeah. And that is the point at which I think that it's a duty incumbent upon all of us to look out for our neighbors.
I think one of the problems we have here is a changing dynamic in the political world where this old theory of let's just ignore them and sit back and let them walk on us while this happens. Eddie Huff, I don't think that works. Eddie Huff said, they're only here because the media is here. Just let the media go. This is a media fight. We have to be able to have our media reps meet with the local media and give our side of the story.
Well, afterwards, that was the thing. The lying media misrepresented. Every article I read, every single article I read, misrepresented what happened. Not one of them came right out and said that they came to disrupt, although they snuck it in one article. I think it was the Tulsa World article or Channel 2 article.
Frank Grove says, we came to disrupt this event. We want them to be aware that not everybody in Oklahoma supports Trump.
But how did they start that? They started it by saying, a stand for President Trump heats up when people with opposing views clash. Supporters held rallies in cities, it says, but the modest turnout grew with rage after a handful of protesters showed up. That is absolutely not true because they had been there for, 5-10 minutes? Before,
a lot longer.
Before they ever started trying to disrupt, and nothing happened. It was silence. Everybody knew what their flag said. Nothing happened.
It wasn't until they yanked the power. When the power
there was the power, it was the yelling.
That's because they got
They
him
pulled
worked
the
up.
power, and then they started.
talk.
Look, they were unable to accost our speakers because they were well amplified with professional sound. When they yanked the power, we lost our amplification for our speakers, and then they were able to yell louder than our speakers, disrespecting the women and reverends there. So it was only because of the homeless veterans that guarded the power for our speakers, like Jaron Jackson and the ladies that spoke, that we were able to continue to hear our speakers. And it was 15 minutes before they gave us trouble. Then when I encountered them, it was another 15 minutes before they worked up their nerve. And then they kept yelling, but they didn't get the response they wanted. So they came back behind the stage and began to approach the equipment, which is,
That's private property.
Well, the point is, you can't. It was a poorly designed event. Bob Jack threw everybody into an ambush. He maybe didn't mean to, but he clearly doesn't have the wherewithal to run an event like this.
Well, none of us.
He doesn't. I do, David. And they didn't run the event properly. They put us in harm's way.
Well, keep in mind,
I shouldn't have had to run security, and I shouldn't have had any protester get near me.
Yeah,
okay?
but again, Bob Jack was not running this event.
If Bob Jack was asked to do something stupid, and Bob Jack says, "Okay, whose fault is it?"
I understand.
Okay.
I'm just pointing.
Okay.
Let's establish this was a Tulsa
was that dark money, as they call it.
No, Tulsa
912 Project and Women for America First will rally.
There you go.
And that is what they call staff writer for Tulsa World dark money.
No. What I'm trying to say, my point here in this is you don't want somebody who's not in charge of it usurping authority and taking over.
Okay.
So
who asked the speakers to come speak?
I would assume it'd be Rhonda Belmont Smith. And
I think there was a coalition of people going out and recruiting speakers.
The way it happened, they put the speakers in a dangerous situation.
I understand that. I'm just, when you single out Bob, listen, if it was his event, then the buck stops there.
Now, if Bob allowed the thing to happen, it was a GOP.
It was not a.
David allowed the thing to happen.
I don't believe it ever was dangerous.
No,
these people were not there dangerously. They were foolish in so much that somebody got knocked, but nobody was hurt.
But listen, the cutout, the truck, and the trailer was Bob's equipment, just like the sound was yours. You protected your equipment. Bob protected his. Right. Now, I'm not saying you don't have other things to criticize here. I'm just setting the record straight. Rhonda's organization did the local event.
Yes. The GOP in Oklahoma, Tulsa County.
Well, they did take dual credit for it.
They didn't.
Well, there you go. Then it goes with.
That's what I'm saying. They're not running it safe.
Then all I said stands corrected. Then, if they were part of that leadership, then they share in the responsibility for.
Well, the thing is that we don't actually expect these kinds of things to happen. Obviously, from now on, we're going to know that
That's
they're
the
going
problem.
Yeah.
Why did you not expect it? Why did the GOP not expect some sort
I
of
think
security
because a lot
needs?
of-
They knew they had to open the bathrooms. They knew they had to open the bathrooms. Why didn't
Who?
they think they had security?
Who?
Somebody had to get the
That would be the
authority.
park department.
But when you get a permit to have
Right,
the people
right,
come
right.
out there, you got to ask for them to
Okay.
open the bathrooms.
Okay.
So they knew they were going to have a crowd out there. They knew they needed bathrooms open. Why didn't they think about security?
Yeah, I know.
Well, I don't know.
I
As
don't
long
either.
as we give equal time to saying, by God, there wouldn't have been a rally if someone didn't step up and organize something.
Absolutely.
It was all, it was volunteers, it was amateurs. Right? It was amateurs.
I'm a professional sound man. I mean,
the sound did sound good.
Thank you for...
it wasn't perfect. It was just loud enough to overcome the yelling, screaming,
Right.
barbaric.
Well, and that's the point, is that they came to disrupt. They got the lying media to back them up. No one from the event was interviewed after the scuffles that took place. Not one attendee was sought for their input, to my knowledge. Not one.
Well, they interviewed.
Rhonda and Bob were interviewed
Yeah.
before the event. They were not interviewed after for follow-up thoughts. And by the time everything ended, all media had disappeared. So
once they got their shots, yeah.
once they got their
Exactly.
shots and they got the protesters on tape, they did not wait around for 15 minutes for everything to end.
Yeah.
And get some follow-ups or even pull anybody off to the side.
So get this Tulsa World sentence here. Tulsa police officers break up a skirmish between Trump supporters and counter-protesters. Now, here's one of the problems I have with the lying media. When we have our event that was permitted to be at the park, that's a positive occurrence. That is, a thing is going to happen. That's not a protest. It doesn't matter what kind of party we're having. We could be having a pro-Kenesha
Yeah,
party
there's no
or an
counter.
anti-Kenesha party. We could have a pro-birthday party or an anti-birthday party. Whatever our permitted access to the park is, that's the event. Protesters came to disrupt
Yeah, not
our event.
counter-protesters.
They're not counter-protesters. They came to
We weren't
disrupt.
protesting any. There was no protest there.
So, here's the thing. Yeah, when you're renting out, because that's what it is when you get a permit, it's a form of rent. There are certain expectations you should have that you'll be allowed to do it orderly. If they allow you to put up any kind of barricade fencing, then great. If the park department says, no, we don't allow that here, now they're putting more responsibility on the police. Now, my question is, did the police respond promptly?
Fairly.
I can tell you that they arrived, they were called about 40 minutes in, 35 minutes in, and it was quite a bit later before I knew they arrived. But what I
It was
heard...
10, 15 minutes.
Okay, but I do know that they were discussing it while I was tearing down equipment, and they said they stood up at the top and just kind of watched for a while.
Well, they were unable to tell. This was after they came the first time.
Oh, okay.
A couple of them stayed up there to keep tabs on things and make sure things didn't fire back up.
Mm-hmm.
And they were unable to tell what was going on because it was behind the stage and behind all the signage, so they were unable to see. So
They didn't come down there to check it out.
No, because they didn't know what was happening.
And they didn't come down there to check it out because
They
they
didn't
didn't know
stay
what was
there.
happening.
They didn't stay there. Right.
You mean they didn't... I'm talking about when they were up at the top of the hill just watching the melee.
They couldn't see the melee.
And they didn't come down to check it out.
Well,
Yeah, they didn't know there
wait
was
a minute,
anything to check out from their
Okay.
vantage point.
How do you know what's not there
They
that you
couldn't
can't see is
see...
there?
They
Yeah.
couldn't
Right.
see anything.
The one thing that they did mention was that they couldn't see it because it was taking place behind the signage.
So
Now
how
that-
come they didn't, come around the back, sneak around the back with their guns drawn?
Because nobody had called them
just
yet.
saying, it
Nobody had
seems like
called
a
them a second
non-emergency
time. Nobody had called them a second time.
I mean,
yeah.
what the hell?
As soon as they, fortunately, we're not in Dallas Fort Worth. They did come back when called a second time. They got redispatched. They walked over.
We
and
should have called for a welfare check.
Listen, Bob, Jack, I'm really sorry. I think that your leadership is, it's probably been well valued over the years, but this type of event is not your strong point.
I saw on social media some comments, including from Rhonda, who put it on, that she's got a lot of notes she'd made about we've got to get better on this, and I forget. I don't want to claim to.
There were lots of lessons learned on this one.
There are, and a bunch of people making notes on stuff. So I think we've got to, understand that. We're going to get better at this. We are not the people who are good at this. The other side, Frank Grove was part of Occupy Wall Street. He was living in a little tent.
Stand toe to toe with Frank Grove.
Well, let's understand. It's easy to tear things down.
Yeah.
It is much harder to have a positive message. Let's face it, their message was ridiculous. They want the war in Syria to continue. That was their message.
Yeah.
And hello, do we not have loved ones that we want out of harm's way over there where they don't belong?
See, now in my day, the pot smokers were the anti-war people.
Well, that's the point. Is things are flipped on their heads, and these are the same people who are demanding your money be paid, that you pay for things they want,
sure,
and so forth, and it's real easy to raise a ruckus and scream a lot and demand things.
Yeah,
it's much more difficult to try to have an orderly discussion and have a and protect yourself from criminals like these people, because they literally acted as criminals.
Well, and you'll notice that it's kind of like the reverse matchy of not in my backyard. I'll protect my equipment. Bob will protect his truck. And these people that were videoing out in the stands, they were saying all the while when the melee started, don't be the troll, don't give them what they want, until the Antifa guys got back by their phone and they were like, hey, stay away from my phone. Ignore them until they're next to your stuff. Well, and then you'll step up.
That's a vital point. Now there were several attendees who stood up and did protect the rest of the crowd from having them running through and all of this.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a scuffle, there was a tug of war over one of the flags and so forth. It shouldn't have, but here's the point. They acted as the security that wasn't there, by design. They stepped up and did that sort of thing. That's what I stepped in to do when they're running over people. And that was a good thing. Again, remember, the protesters were only trying to create that situation because people get all squeamish inside when they see it. It is the same thing. It is nothing different than what the Nazis did, what the communists did when they were trying to disrupt society in their days. Nothing different. The only difference is the amount of violence used. Here we're milquetoast compared to the Russians and the Russian communists and the Nazis. But the techniques are identical. Go in and break up a meeting, and rather than clubs, we're going to wave a flag, we're going to yell real loud. But our nation and our society has become so squeamish that when we see that, it's like, oh no, there must be something wrong. Everybody has to get along. Oh, we have to be good. And the thing is that these people don't have the right to be breaking in.
This was disturbing the peace. It's against the law to disturb someone's peace. It's not about sharing the park. You don't get to scream in my face while I'm doing my art.
Exactly. When you go to a Trump rally, in fact, several of my family went to the one in Minneapolis. That was so ruckus in that. Those rallies, they're not for the faint of heart. I mean, you got to stand in line half a day or camp out to get in.
Well, there were guys there for several days.
Okay, this event was mostly the Luby's cafeteria crowd. Was there? It was. The average age was. I'm sorry, I would have been one of the younger ones.
Right.
They seem to be the only ones that are still disciplined to show up at these events and show some interest. Most of the people younger than us aren't showing up.
One of the problems is there's no focus of the information from the group. You couldn't tell if it was a church service or a political rally. You're going to lose a lot of neo-Republicans because they don't want to come to a church service.
Yeah. Well, I agree with that. That's.
I mean, I don't mind. I believe in Jesus too, but the message was so mixed up. I love Trump because I love Jesus or something.
Well, and the message is mixed up because some of the people who were doing the speaking of that kind of a message are some of your blue law Christians who are actually those that constitutionalists abhor.
In this type of event, you need to focus all of the political rhetoric in the area of at one time, and then add the religious aspect to it at another time. If it sounds like a pulpit church service all day long, it gives fodder for the anti.
Well, there's that too. Yes.
Yeah, well, my thing is, every segment of our society is going to have their get-togethers, and I'm just glad this segment of society showed up to wage their, we support Trump. I'm just disappointed that the other segments of society seem to not be showing up anywhere.
Well, and that may have been partly because of the communication, and the other thing is, because I don't think the national march was planned all that long ago to really get the word out.
Yeah.
So it would, I think you'll see that more as time comes. But again, I think there were a lot of lessons learned on this one.
We're going to have to get some John Waynes in the GOP around here.
Yeah.
I know that our side is really worried about the optics. Folks, we lost the optics fight 40 years ago. Yeah. We just got to cling to the narrative. So see if you can fight for the truth out there. Salvation comes through faith, not through political optics, kids. And so, hey, I'm Tom McKay for 3D Politics. We're going to get out of here. A nice extended version. We're missing D'Ambroso, but tonight you've been enjoying David Van with SoonerPolitics.org, David Oldham with ConstitutionalGrounds.com, and I'm Tom McKay. You can just yell at me all you want at Tom E. McKay on Twitter, or catch me right here, 3dpolitics.com or 3D Politics Live.